Five Holdings announced the listing of its $350 million worth green bond on Nasdaq Dubai this week. The real estate and hospitality entity joins regional conglomerates like Majid Al Futtaim and global firms like the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China in issuing green bonds on the Dubai-based stock exchange. We caught up with DIFC's Chief Strategy and Ventures Officer to learn more.
The DIFC is the largest sustainable finance hub in the Middle East, Africa and South Asia, and the largest debt capital market for sustainable and green bonds and sukuk. And so what that means, the exchange where most of them are listed is Nasdaq Dubai, which is based in the DIFC, and it's around $24 billion outstanding bonds and sukuk which are listed that are aligned with green or sustainable frameworks.
But what exactly are green bonds? Simply put, it is a debt security issued by an organization for the purpose of financing or refinancing projects that contribute positively to the environment or climate. It is a loan made by an investor to an organization to finance a project, with the investor receiving the principal amount at the end of the loan's life, in addition to interest payments. Sukuks are Sharia-compliant bonds where interest paying is not permissible. Now, the main difference between a green bond and a conventional bond is the project it finances. Kunz explains how it works.
So you first of all need to think about your strategy and how does sustainability link to what you're doing? What are the risks that you might need to mitigate because of these changes that are happening? And then define your own strategy. And the first thing that we did and that others do is actually create a materiality, because you can't solve everything. So you're trying to understand, and in our case we did a double materiality, so we're talking to your internally what is the priorities, but also talking to your main stakeholders what they say is actually the priority in terms of is it climate change, is it maybe responsible procurement and other topics and so on. And then you define your goals and where you stand today and how to transition. Now the transition will require financing, and this transition financing you need to define how do I want to finance it. Can I finance it myself? Or do I need to raise financing from the market? And so a bond or a sukuk would be one vehicle to raise the financing.
Now, green bonds have additional transaction costs as the issuer must monitor, track and record on use of proceeds. Hence, transitioning for companies and countries could be an expensive process.
Globally, climate financing it alone, I think $100 billion annually required just for climate, and I think it's nearly $2 to $5 trillion a year to achieve all the SDGs, all the 7 SDGs. So there's a lot of financing required. What is it required for? A few things, right? One is we want to do all the new things in a way that is carbon neutral and aligns with these standards and principles as much as possible. But the bigger heavy lift is to how do we refurbish and how do we transition the things we already have? So how do we operate our businesses today and move them to a more sustainable manner? How do we have, in the building space, how do we refurbish existing buildings that they're more energy efficient and they're more successful? And that is really expensive, and this is also quite difficult to do.
Another key challenge is the lack of unified regulations. The green bond market is underpinned by voluntary guidelines in most jurisdictions. Currently, the green bonds principles and the climate bond standards are the most frequently referenced.
Regulation have two elements. One is like how can we use policy and regulation to accelerate adoption and moving to a more sustainable and green future. And two, how can we make it simple for the companies to actually provide the data and the reporting and not, at the moment we have over 1,000 different standards globally. So how do we make that easier so it's not costly, but actually an easy way for companies to transition? On the second one, there's different efforts. So where there's our regulator, the Dubai Financial Services Authority, is part of the UAE Sustainable Finance Working Group, which is the policymakers and the central bank and our DFSA and others discussing principles and how to integrate sustainability and climate-related risks in the reporting and the regulation of financial institutions. The other side is where the DFSA, for example, and we as well, have a task force to understand from the international players and the regional players, mainly the international because they're exposed already to so many different standards, what do we believe is the standard the global standard we should all kind of merge to. Maybe it's not one, maybe it's 3 or 4, but not 1,000.